In the software world, there are so many things to learn, so many things changing. It can be absolutely overwhelming, and there can be a constant pressure that you aren't doing enough. When I first entered the industry, there was an enormous pressure to make your entire life revolve around software. Coding at your job, studying at home, studying on the weekends. And at the time, I was very impressionable, and I thought I needed to follow the same path. This is the story of how I realized that trying to do everything and relying on your career for happiness is a mistake. When I started my career at 22, I had no passions in life. I didn't have any real hobbies, I struggled to make friends, and I was in a city that I was unfamiliar with. My coworkers, they were my only connections, essentially my only friends. And while we spent some of our time just hanging out and playing pool or something, we spent most of our time talking about work. They were all much more experienced than I was, and they would come to work and talk about the new web technology they learned last night. Or they spent their night grinding leet code questions. And all of this, it made me start to question myself. I came to work, I did my job, and I would go home and play video games or scroll on YouTube or something. But I had always been told that the happiest people in life were the ones who were deeply passionate about something in life. Seeing my coworkers trying so hard to become better engineers, it inspired me, but it also put pressure on me. And because of that, my life and my work slowly began to come together as one. And for a while, my schedule, it was pretty simple. I would work at my regular 9 to 5. And afterwards, at night and on the weekends, I would dedicate all of my time to learning anything about web development, anything that could really further my career. I've never been much of a talker or like someone that can impress with my words. So instead, I would try to let my work speak for itself. And naturally, learning about technologies over the weekend, it slowly transitioned into doing work in all my free time. I did things like read tech blogs about tools that could improve our development process and implement it over the weekend. Or I would agree on unrealistic deadlines and work until 3 or 4 in the morning to finish projects. I would push myself to the absolute limits physically and mentally just to appease other people. Whenever I heard the words thank you or good job from my boss, I felt an overwhelming sense of validation come over me. Maybe it was because I remembered the pain of not being able to find a job in the first place. Or maybe it's because raised in an immigrant family, you're never really told I'm proud of you enough. But every time I heard those words, it didn't matter how many hours I was working, how long I was working, how many weekends I had to put in. All that mattered was that I felt like I had a place in this world. I didn't have friends, I didn't have a life, I didn't have any passions outside of coding, but I felt like I had a calling and a meaning to my life, which was my career. And looking back, it's pretty clear that this was a really unhealthy lifestyle, but just like a toxic relationship, I couldn't see my own stress when I was in the situation. And slowly, I began to grow sick and tired of the mentally draining process of endlessly grinding on projects. I began to grow tired of spending all my weekends doing some sort of web development tutorial for hours or something. But at this crucial point of my personal development, instead of realizing my mistakes, instead of improving my work-life balance, I decided what I really needed was to take a step forward. You see, in the past, whenever I was introduced to someone who worked at some sort of big tech Fortune 500 company, I would just immediately be impressed and I would put these people on a pedestal. And it was during this stage of my career when I saw my friends, my coworkers, my acquaintances all start their careers at big tech companies. And again, I felt an overwhelming sense of pressure that I needed to do the same. These people, it seemed like they were about to enter the peak of their software career. I told myself, this is what I want. This is how I'm going to fix all of my problems. And so with that, I set out to achieve my goals. All the time I spent researching coding technologies, working from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Instead, I dedicated to studying for software engineering interviews. I ended up working at Intuit, and once I signed the offer, I was ready to dedicate every second of my life into this job. But almost as soon as I got there, I found myself grasping at the question, what was this all really for? This job was not fundamentally different from any other job I had in my career. And I realized that no one really gives a shit about what company you work for. In reality, true happiness doesn't come from work. I had done all of these things in my career because I felt like I needed to. I felt like I needed to match the work and the effort of my peers. And because I thought giving everything to this career, it was going to make me happy. And I also realized that the learning in the software world, it will never end. There's always new technologies, new frameworks. You could spend literally every day for the rest of your life learning about code and new technologies, and you would never reach the end of it. And I also realized that I did all of this because I had no passions outside of work. I didn't dedicate my time to making friends or maintaining the relationships with friends I had. I just coded, and that was it. I finally realized just how misguided placing all of my life satisfaction into work really was. This story was not meant to hate on people who want to work really hard in their career. Instead, it's more of a cautionary tale in trying to balance your work and your life. I do think it's easy for fresh college grads or aspiring software engineers to be influenced by their peers. The ones who decide to sink every waking moment into their work because they feel like they have to. Or the ones that feel like they have to study every moment outside of work because they feel like they need to. But let's think about this. Is your employer going to be at your wedding? Will your bosses, your coworkers, your recruiters be there on your deathbed? Your jobs change, your coworkers leave, but one thing that never changes is how much time you have in your life. A senior engineer at a company once told me, there is nothing that can't wait until Monday. And ever since then, I've been extremely protective of my time. I have hard cutoffs for how many hours I'll work in a day. I take on only realistic deadlines with wiggle room for unexpected problems that arise. And outside of work, I spend healthy amounts of time with friends on the weekend. I've developed passions for fields outside of software. And most importantly, I've tried to figure out what will actually bring me genuine happiness.